Take your place amongst the stars. The greats, the graves, the smashed up cars. You got a monkey on your back, and your sacroiliac has developed a crack.
So, like I said, I spoke to Victor, so he's given me his version of how this all happened. So I'd love to hear from you guys, see if it all jives and makes sense. So tell me the story of how the night crickets got together, please. And we'll start with David, and then you can pass it on to Darwin.
Okay. Well, Darwin initiated this by approaching Victor with the idea of them collaborating long distance and, sharing files.
Yep.
And then apparently Victor suggested bringing me into the throng.
Yep.
And as soon as I heard of it, I thought, yeah, that sounds, enticing. So we just sort of kicked it off by dipping our toes tentatively into the water, as it were, and just to see if there was a chemistry there. Yep. And we instantly knew there was.
That's pretty cool.
And it just kind of caught fire, from that little kindling, and resulted in the album, that you have.
Because on paper you wouldn't put two and two together and come up with this combination, but
I suppose it's not obvious. But I mean, Victor's former band were very dear to me and Love and Rockets in general.
Right?
We loved that first album. And it was quite influential on us. And so, I've seen them live a couple of times. I love the idea of the Violent Femmes. And Victor's obviously a great drummer. I played with Victor in a solo capacity in Chicago. We did a gig. And that worked out really well. Just a one-off gig. Cool. But, we met and really hit it off. And he's a great chap. So, it's a really generative, satisfying project.
So Darwin, it sounds like you're the middleman. You're the glue that holds these guys together.
Yeah. Well, you said who would have thought? I did.
There you go.
I everyone says that, who would have thought that the bassist of Bauhaus, and to me, it really makes a very, very natural fit.
Right.
And I love both their playing and their bands. And so, I thought it would just be me and Victor, Victor and I. And like David said, Victor said, well, why don't you just ask him? I said, all right, well, I'll ask him. And David said, well, let's do one or two, see what it sounds like. And I think we sent David 2 and he came back with 4 or something. We gave him 4 or 5 to choose from, and he just did 4 of them.
Right. So
there was an immediate excitement and reaction to it, which I think you can hear it. It's very reactive.
Right.
There's not a lot of planning in this record.
So David, what was your reaction when you heard them?
I just instantly got ideas for bass lines, going, listening to the rhythm, and I liked the feel. Victor's got a particular feel. It's kind of, he's like a jazz approach. There's a jazz approach to his playing.
Yeah.
And it's just like in the pocket. So for me as a bass player, it was a joy to play with his rhythms and his beats. And I loved what Darwin had done as well, melodically. Right. I've worked with Darwin extensively in the past, in all sorts of different capacities. I produced Darwin's first album. And also he's played with me in my band for a number of years. So we have a rapport.
Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting because both you and Victor have very distinctive style that is instantly identifiable, but yet you've managed to put it together and come up. It still sounds like you, but it sounds like something else as well. So.
Yeah. Well, when you come together, it's the third mind, as William Burroughs and Brian Geising would refer to it, collaborative work. It produces it's another entity. And it's always, I love that. I've always been fascinated by that conjuring, what can come through collaboration, just completely it's unique to the collaborators, you know, and
Yeah.
Depending on who's involved, you're going to have a very different character.
Yeah, and of course, to make it more interesting, you guys weren't even in the same rooms together when you were making this music. So.
No, not at all.
Not
That's crazy.
No, because of the pandemic situation, but we just worked with that situation.
Yep.
And it was just exciting, just sort of like passing the parcel, if you like, and just adding to it, you know. And then we'd just decide when it was done. We'd all be on the same page with that. It just felt obvious, you know. Okay, that one's done. Next.
Yep. So Darwin, since you're kind of, I get the feeling you're kind of the producer putting this stuff together. Working like this, is that different than you worked before? Is it better, worse, or just different?
I have worked this way almost exclusively because I have a very small little room. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we record, you know, in the room and stuff like that, but you get more and more projects like this because people record in their bedrooms or closets or bathrooms, and then they go, can you mix this or something, you know, and they send it out. So I've done this for a couple records. My last record I did with Julian Shaw Taylor almost exclusively like this.
Right.
And I find it really exciting. The difference is those were always driven by me or someone else making the decisions. With this band, no one made decisions really. It just sort of happened with reactions. And then we all sort of had the ability to step aside and say, okay, that's done, or that needs a little bit more, or, you know, it's a little bit different when you have a collaboration like that, where everyone really does work for the song
right
at the end of the day.
Yeah. So who was making the ultimate decision? That's a keeper. Was it difficult?
It was always a group decision.
Yeah, group. Yeah. You know, if someone there were times where, you know, it would, well, maybe we should do, maybe we shouldn't. And maybe the person that sort of sang it or had more to do with the beginning of the tune would say, yeah, okay, how about this? And you kind of just let that happen because they were the originator of its, original idea. But usually it was just, we kind of just knew, and maybe you would even come back to it later and say, you know, I've been listening to this for a couple weeks and I do like that trumpet part after all, or whatever it is.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to pick a couple of tunes, not at random, but ones that I didn't talk about with Victor to run past you guys, and you can tell me a little bit. The first one I wanted to talk about was A Free Society. There's got a little spoken part in there, and there's a very strong bass line, of course. So, and I don't know who's written what, so you can help me out there as well.
Imagine, if you will, a free society where the empty horses can run wild and ad hoc without fear of variance of concern.
Well, how that came about was when we were trying to think of a band name, and we had a list. I actually literally had a list with me in the studio when I received the instrumental parts, the initiative instrumental. And I looked at this list, and it looked like it read like a kind of surreal poem, just the names, you know. And so I spontaneously, I said, just to the engineer, I'm going to do a vocal, spontaneous. I'm not going to think about it. And I just basically read off that list, but sort of cemented the names together there and there. And I just sort of little link phrases or words, you know, that made it a kind of a weird dream-like story. And that's literally how that came about. So all those lyrics were potential band names. And of course, we settled on Night Crickets is the last, thing that you hear, and that was the band name that we chose.
Right.
So that's how that came about. But
very cool.
There was and that's kind of typical to MO in that there was always this kind of a bit of a surrealist thread runs through the whole thing.
Right. Well, that kind of almost explains Roman Clef. It's about, I Googled what it means, real people with invented names in novels, what I learned from that. But maybe, so is that kind of the surrealism that you're kind of referring to?
I could tell the real story in a roman à clé. change the names and faces to keep those lawyers away.
I had sort of snippets of lyrics, incomplete lyrics, and I was just pulling from those and just putting them together. So in that there was these sort of surreal juxtapositions that came forward. That one, I think there were two elements they brought together, and I thought, oh well, this kind of works, and then worked on it once I had that idea. Again, just very spontaneous, and there and then in the studio, not like I was in to record, then I'd have these bits of paper with odd lyrics on and just pull them out, and then very quickly glue them together, and then go in and do a vocal. Gotcha. It's usually like what you're hearing is the first take, or the second take, but usually the first take.
Okay.
Same with the bass lines. I didn't rehearse any bass lines. I actually record those bass lines that you hear are the first take, and the first time I'm inventing it.
Right.
So I'm hearing it, and sometimes I just hear like a little snippet of the track, just a few seconds. Okay, I get the groove of that. Roll tape, and then I'm playing.
I mean, you've been playing bass for years. Is that how you always work, or is this something new for you?
More and more these days, but with this project, it was all that. That was the entire, that was the approach.
Right.
And it's a really good sign, I think, when things work straight off, like that.
Yeah. There's a track called "Sacred Monster," and it sounds to me like there's a female voice in there somewhere. So I don't know. I don't have a list of credits. Is that the case, or what can you tell me about making that one?
No female vocals. No.
Really? Well, there you go.
Nothing on you. Nothing on you. Nothing on you. Nothing on you.
Because I mean that's a shared vocal. I do most of the vocal. Darwin does it.
There's a high one in there.
Yeah, there's a high one in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just
we have a
in
good
touch with our feminine side.
Good on you.
Between the three of us, we have a good vocal range.
Right. And there's also quite a bit of organ along with the bass and that. Is that Darwin playing the organ?
It's everybody.
It's everybody.
It's sometimes it's Victor, sometimes it's Janet, sometimes it's Julian, sometimes it's me.
Right.
But who played on Sacred Monster?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. I think that I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Sorry. There wasn't a lot of thought into it, and what I just tried, as you said before, that David, they're known for their bands, but they're also known for the sound of their instruments.
Absolutely.
And so for me, the bass and drums had to take the lead. And then everything else was just like what little seasoning you don't have to do too much. Just let it be. And David and I are big fans of dub music, so I added a lot of delays and stuff like that, which is something that Victor probably wouldn't have normally done because he likes that really organic sound. Yep. But for some reason, it kind of works. It has a little bit of a new sound to it when you put it all together.
Okay. And are you thinking about performing live?
We originally this was going to be exclusively a studio project. And I was the one sticking to that more than the others. But the more I hear this record, the more I fall in love with it. And I said recently to Darwin, perhaps we could take this on the road, just play some selective dates in the right kind of venues. So it's becoming more and more appealing to me, that idea. And I think we could make it work.
And who do you think, how do you think people are going to react knowing folks know your backgrounds, especially yours and Victor's. So when they come and hear this, how do you expect them to relate to it?
Well, hopefully they would come with an open mind.
Right.
And I think if that was the case, then I think that they would be quite delighted by it.
All righty. Now, there's a track called Little Did I, which is a little much more upbeat and almost bouncy in a way rather than some of the other ones. So maybe, did you think about the tone and the mood when you were making this record?
I know what you do when you go away. I can see it all anyway.
That particular track was initiated very much so by Victor.
Uh-huh.
And really it was down to myself and Darwin to just add a little seasoning to it.
Gotcha.
But that's atypical in that it was, one of the musicians' presence is sort of uppermost there. Most of the tracks, it's very much like a three-way contribution.
Interesting. And you've been involved in, is it difficult? How different is it working in this band and in other bands you've been in?
It's very easygoing. It's not, and very desirable for that.
I see. Okay. Because you're still involved with all these other things as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All these other things. Yeah.
These other things.
Well, and that was part of the reason why playing live was a little bit of a pipe dream,
right.
Because it's not that he didn't want to play, or
right.
I think if anything, we wanted to make sure we did it justice, and that would require some work,
right,
and time. David didn't really have a whole lot of time, so
gotcha. Yeah,
and also one factor in this whole process was that, and it was actually great to have this. It was very liberating to think that you weren't thinking in terms of, oh well, we're recording this, but eventually we're going to play it live, so we have to bear that in mind. Can we? And in a way you compromise sometimes because you're trying to make it, you're trying to perform it in a way that can be performed live. I mean, there's obviously going to be some overdubs that aren't going to be there when we play it live, but this was completely just go for use the studio as a
it's kind of like instrument. Kind of what happened to the Beatles when they were making Sgt. Pepper. I don't think they thought about how
exactly. There's no that's not a consideration. Oh, we got to do this live, lad.
Right.
So maybe we shouldn't add that crazy fairground organ,
right.
But there's no limitations. So we will use the crazy fairground organ, whatever. Just throw it all in there. It's just a studio construct.
So do you see doing another record and taking this further?
Maybe, but I'd like to pursue this to
sure. The record's barely out.
It's full expression. And I mean, if we were to do it live, and I can see ways of getting around the studio element in that we could have samples. I mean, my brother does it a lot, Kevin, with Bauhaus and Suddy, very much so with Love and Rockets, where he would actually have samples from the recordings and trigger them on drum pads. So it's not like it's just a recording that you're playing along to. It's actually physical. He is triggering, so it's part of the organic physicality of playing, but pre-recorded sounds.
Cool. I got one more track. I did speak to Victor about this one, but since you're in San Francisco area, Candlestick Park obviously is where the baseball and the Beatles and all that stuff, and that's all kind of wrapped into songs.
Candlestick Park. Candlestick Park. Candlestick Park. Straight by the rain. Candlestick Park. Straight by the rain. Candlestick Park. Straight by the rain. Candlestick Park.
Well, almost, except for Little Did I, like David just said, every song was originated with a drum beat. Victor gave us a bunch of drum beats.
Right.
We would listen to, out of 10, we go, I like number 3, 7, and 4 or whatever. That's how, except for this one too. This one was, it's kind of a story of my parents. You know, they went and saw. They were at the Beatles show. My dad was working there.
Was he selling
and my
popcorn
mom-
or something?
Yeah, he said he didn't sell anything though because everybody. He said everybody was just focused on the band, you know, and
Yep.
everybody was high. And he said it just smoke everywhere and people screaming, and you couldn't hear the music, anything.
And that was
You
their
couldn't
last gig,
hear
wasn't it?
Yeah, and so I always thought that was crazy because you always go, you know, man, I wish I could have saw the Beatles, but a person that I knew that had seen the Beatles said it was awful. So it was kind of, you know, and then also just living here, you know, I saw a lot of amazing things happen there with,
Yeah.
you know, so there's just, David had heard the story and he's always sort of, I don't know, he's keeping, keeping logs of these things and he'll say, you know, you should do some with that one.
Right.
And so that's where that came from.
It was a conversation that we had, and you
Yeah.
were just telling me the story about your dad working there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and when you were telling me it, I was thinking this should be a song. And I said it to Darwin, you should make this a song, you know. And he
Yeah.
went away and did his homework, his project.
Yeah, so
He came back, and then we collaborated. And I wrote
Yeah.
the middle eight lyrics.
Yeah,
There's
it
one.
was, it was really nice to it really, again, everything. That's why when you say, are you going to make another record? There's almost a fear in me because
Yeah.
it was so fun to do this.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting and new. And there was no negativity. And it was just really a wonderful time. So I'm almost worried to try to
Yeah,
do
fair enough.
Can we even do it again? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Because it was so nice. And
I mean, let's face it, with the way the world is, you can't plan anything. You don't know what's I mean,
Right.
here in New Zealand.
No.
We're all
Yeah.
COVID freaking out that the Omicron is going to come and get us. We're living fairly free and clear of it, but it's like this feeling like it's going to get us any day, you know, and so nobody can plan anything. And I'm sure it's the same over there as well. So,
well, it's more of a wave here.
yeah.
Everything starts, you start thinking, oh, here it goes. All right, we're almost
yeah.
ready. And then there's just the collapse, and then it starts again. And you just start getting dulled to it.
Yep.
And anticipating the demise that's coming. It can be, it can get you in your head a little bit.
Yeah. I guess we're probably creating a new genre of music, pandemic rock or something, or whatever it is, stuff that's made among this
There's
scenario.
going to be a lot of studies that are done in the
Yeah.
future, and we're going to learn a lot about this time that we
Yeah, I
don't
think so.
really
I think-
understand yet.
Excellent. All righty. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to talk to me because it's almost Friday there. So it'll be out and about and you can go out and celebrate a little bit, I'm sure. And if you do decide to take it on the road, bring it down here. We'd love to see it.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Marty.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thanks,
much.
Marty.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.